Hello. Welcome on back to my channel. I hope y'all are doing well. Today we are transforming my friend Caitlin into the one and only, the glamorous Zara Larsson. I'm talking rhinestones and blush and even the hair. I have my friend Adrian here, who's an incredible hairstylist, who's going to be working his magic, putting a blonde wig on Caitlin. So without further ado, if you want to learn how I created this look right here, then keep on watching. So to begin, I'm using the Farmacy Honey Halo Moisturizer to prep Caitlin's skin with. I find myself coming back to this formula over the years because it's lightweight, it won't interfere with the foundation, it won't weigh down the skin either, it just gives us a really beautiful starting point overall. Next, I'm using the One Size Secure the Blur Primer, and I'm only focusing this through the T-zone, where I really want that soft blur. You know what I mean? This is going to smooth everything out and gives us that really polished finish by the time we're done. Next, for a foundation, I'm using the Haus Labs Triclone Skin Tech Foundation, along with their foundation brush. I chose this shade because I want Caitlin's face to match her body, which has more warmth and a tan to it. And I'm only using one pump here. I'm not trying to build this up to be full coverage. I'd say I'm trying to go for more of a medium coverage finish with that hydrated, healthy quality that keeps the skin looking fresh and dewy and refined. Isn't that beautiful? Now, for blush, I'm using the Haus Labs blush stick, and I really want this to have presence. So I'm placing it high up on the cheekbones and diffusing it out because I'm using an underpainting technique. So by the time concealer and powder go over top, I still want that warmth to softly show through underneath and support the powder blush we later layer. Now for concealer, I'm using the Triclone Skin Tech concealers because they work beautifully with the rest of the line. And I'm using two shades here. The first goes more on the outer half of the eye, very close to the foundation shade, and I'm barely diffusing it out over the blush. Then for the inner corner, because Zara Larsson is kind of known for that lifted brightness there, I'm placing a lighter shade right into that inner corner and softly diffusing it out with a brush, keeping most of the concentration exactly where we want that light to hit, so we preserve that beautiful gradient. Now what really takes that brightness further is pressing these two shades from the Huda Beauty Icy Nude eyeshadow palette right on top of that concealer. Not only does this lock everything into place, it also brightens the area even more. It really pushes that effect, you know what I mean? It's not quite white, but there's almost like this lavender undertone there, which is why mixing these two shades works so beautifully. And it's going to look even more striking once we return to the eyes later on. Before that though, I'm using the One Size translucent setting powder, and with a large fluffy brush, I'm pressing this into the foundation. Notice here I'm tapping rather than using sweeping motions because I don't want to disturb what's underneath it. It is translucent, so it won't shift the tone of the foundation. And then with the powder puff here, I'm pressing powder onto the under eye area so that concealer stays smooth, it stays blurred and secured all day. Once that first layer is set, I go in with a heavier amount and use the baking technique with that same powder, which we'll come back to later on to wipe off. Next up, I'm using this Haus Labs powder blush right over that same area we had applied the cream blush earlier. I can't quite remember off the top of my mind which shade this is, but I'll be sure to include this along with the shades of everything else I'm using today down below in the description box in the product breakdown. Now for eyeshadow, I'm taking this Anastasia palette and dipping it into this light purple shade, smoking it across the complete upper lid. I really want this diffused and not concentrated too tightly at the lash line because that softness is what gives the look its shape. Don't be afraid to let it travel slightly towards the temple. That's what gives us the drama. Next, taking a deeper purple from the same palette, I'm focusing this on the outer corner and slightly into the crease for a bit more dimension. We're staying in the same purple family, but building the color story because the first shade leans more magenta, while this one has a cooler, bluer undertone. That subtle contrast makes the eye much more interesting, in my opinion. I'll also bring a little onto the lower lash line, but I always keep that inner corner bright from the first shadows we used. Now, mixing these two shimmers on my finger, I'm tapping them right onto the center of the lid, which adds the most beautiful sparkle. You can never go wrong with a little razzle dazzle. And once we add rhinestones, it's going to become even more breathtaking. But before we get there, I'm using this Anastasia Beverly Hills Tinted Brow Gel in the shade Blonde. Because I have my friend here, Adrian, who's an incredible hairstylist, he's going to be applying a blonde wig onto Caitlin, so I want the brows to soften lightly, so everything just feels cohesive once the hair goes on. You can even apply a little bit of your concealer onto the brow hairs, and that will also lighten them. Now, real quick, I'm adding this Too Faced liquid liner, so when we apply the strip lash, there's this seamless blend, and it also gives us a little lift throughout the outer corner. Winging it outward really helps elevate the eye, but, nothing too dramatic. For mascara, I'm using the Haus Labs mascara. A lot of Haus Labs products today. I'm being generous on the top lashes, but much lighter on the bottom because I don't want to drag the eye downward. I want everything to stay kind of lifted. For lashes, I'm using a strip lash that flares more toward the outer corner, if that makes sense. So we keep that lifted shape through the eye. Now for the fun part, I'm using these rhinestones. I get them from Amazon. They're cheap and cheerful, and I apply them by dotting on a few little spots of clear lash glue at a time, then placing the stones one by one. This is where you can really have fun and build it up to be however you want it to be. The more, the better. And honestly, it's hard to mess this up. My one piece of advice is to kind of mix sizes, larger stones and smaller stones, so it has more movement and dimension. For lips, I'm using the Makeup Forever lip pencil in the shade Endless Cacao to trace Caitlin's lips with, because so many of Zara's looks had that cooler toned lip, so this kind of makes the perfect first step. Then I'm mixing this pink liquid lipstick from the Sephora Collection with the White Lipmix from MAC to create a very, very pale baby pink. I'm placing that in the center and then kind of blending it outward. I want this lip to feel very bright and pale, and that White Lip Mix that we use from MAC is really what gets us to that finish line. Then I'm using the Laneige Lip Glowy Balm right on top. This one has a slight reddish tone. It's very sheer, but that little hint of red keeps the lip from looking too flat and kind of adds that life back into it. Next, I'm using the Patrick Ta Beauty Body Balm to add sheen through the skin. Do you see how that gloss ties the face into the body? It creates such a beautiful overall finish. And then last but not least, I'm going to be using the One Size Powder Melt Glass Setting Spray and spraying this around the perimeter to melt everything together, soften the powders, and give that glossy sheen, which makes the perfect final step. And how I created the Zara Larsson look on a naturally beautiful model. I hope you all enjoyed today's tutorial. If you did, be sure to give this video a big ol' thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. You can check out more of my work on my Instagram at Painted by Spencer. And until next time, I'll see you soon.